So, yeah, thank you, gentlemen and ladies. Thank you for sparing your afternoon and being with us today. We begin our session on addressing information security challenges for our connected today. So we have with us Vijay Lakshmi Suresh. She is a seasoned professional. She has started her career with mainframe systems and moved on to now today's connected workforce with diversity of systems going through the .com era. She has been primarily a system consultant, and she has she's been involved in the security aspects of right from startups and budding organizations to very large organizations. So welcome Vijay on board, and we look forward to having a great session today. We have some polls also coming in between the sessions, as well as towards the end of the session. Please go ahead and participate. We have some goodies which go on to some of the winners in the end. And thank you, and have a great time with you.
Thanks, Neil. It's a pleasure to be presenting at this webinar. Let me get started now. There's this friend of mine called Ramesh who recently sold his house and had quite some money in cash. He had to travel to the US for a few days and he wanted to keep it very, very safe. So he bought himself a huge locker after evaluating multiple options. He found one that had a biometric option and could be so heavy that could be lifted only by a crane. Checked all the warranty conditions, fireproof, waterproof, and then at last was satisfied, put all the money in it, flew off to the US. Guess what? He was in the US when the demonetization was announced on the 8th of November. What I'm trying to communicate here is it's not about how much precautions you take, it's about even evaluating what are the threats that your information has, what are the threats that you have to take care of. When we look at threats, I guess opportunities and threats come together. I mean, if we don't want to live in a perfectly secure environment, I guess we don't have to do anything, but that doesn't help. So we need the current technologies, we need everything that the current world offers, but there are also opportunities and they come together with threats. All of you must have been reading in the newspapers and magazines about the kind of hacks and threats that have been happening in the recent past. I mean, as late as last week, I heard that our bank's ATMs were hacked and quite a few, 46 crores or something, just because of security lapses. And guess what? All ATMs work still on Windows NT, which is not even patched. So that's a message that we have to live in this world. There's no going back if we want to use the opportunities that the current technologies offer. But at the same time, we have to see what we can do about the threats, how to counter them. Moving on to just get the set up the terminology for the discussion today. Threats exploit vulnerabilities which cause incidents. Incidents would impact your assets, and assets produce, and the incidents have a business impact on your profitability, on your customers, on your reputation, and probably your survival itself. And so you have to look at what kind of controls you need to put in place. And controls come in different flavors. We have preventive controls, we have detective controls, and we have corrective controls. Each one working on different aspects in this framework. Some reduce the vulnerability, some help you detect incidents in time so that you can react, and some help you reduce the business impact once it's hit you. So there you go in terms of the framework for controls. So what in the current generation, what can business do? What can an information security officer do when we look at all the controls in play and all the demands that come in through new technologies that are there in the market today? So I guess you really can't look at extreme steps like what Dilbert is doing or a Norman Liker is taking. So you'll have to come in between these two extremes and figure out what is best for you. So before we look at specific systems and an approach to improving your security, let me quickly touch upon a few elements, three things in particular. I mean, there's lots of changes happening in the market today. Three things in particular which have had a very high impact on information security and organizations. The cloud computing. Cloud has brought in a whole lot of advantages to business, but also brought with it several threats. So there are threats of data breaches. I mean, all these threats, if you see, have been around, but they come in with additional risks that the cloud brings in. The cloud brings in opportunities and the risks. The advantages is that you could move everything, you could get started day one as a new business, you could use all the services, software as a service, platform as a service, everything could be outsourced and you could become productive day one if you're setting up an organization. But the problem is you have to also assume there are threats coming with the cloud and you have to figure out how to put in controls that protect your data. Okay, some of these specific things when you go for the cloud computing is the risks of security stay with you. While you have outsourced the operations, while you have outsourced your environment maintenance, platform maintenance, the applications, all of it, the cloud provider is in charge of security while you actually feel the pinch when something goes wrong. So the data breaches affect you, so you have to take care of some of the security implications. And again, when we look at something like system vulnerabilities exist even in a normal environment. Now, due to multi-tenancy, your applications, your platform are all sitting one next to the other, and any vulnerability any vulnerability in one of the sites is going to impact everything else. And then you have APIs, you have interfaces interfacing across different layers in the cloud. And any vulnerability in any of these layers could have an impact on your data. Yeah. So thank you for your responses. So moving on, the second point or the second aspect which is influencing security in a big way is the usage of multiple devices in the organization. We're talking about a laptop. I mean, earlier we used to talk about desktops, and then we had a laptop which was more mobile, which could be taken out of the organization. And now you have a series of devices which people would expect to use both at a personal level as well as for office work. I mean, the demands of people to be able to bring your own device, to use your own laptop, or being able to connect from your mobile or your tablet at office, at workplace, while driving. I mean, the devices make you more productive, no doubt, but again, devices bring with them the risks. For one thing, some of the mobile devices are easily, I mean, you can lose your device. Somebody could steal it. You could leave it behind in your car. You could leave it behind in a public transport. So all this make it much more vulnerable. Then there are malicious code which attacks your devices, and the protection that you would offer inside your organization perimeter is not something that you are likely to have extended to your mobile device unless you've been very cautious, and that increases the vulnerability. And so you have to be very cautious when you are talking about mobile devices and usage of personal devices for office work. There are insider threats again, so which I won't be able to talk about each of them for paucity of time. So while we talk about devices and the threats that come in along with the devices, so what can we do about it? That's something all of you will be wondering. So some things that you should look at when it comes to mobile devices is look at specific security implications of mobiles. In fact, analysts predict that by 2018, 25% of corporate data will completely bypass perimeter security and flow directly from mobile devices to the cloud. So you can imagine the kind of data that you are holding today internally with your perimeter security in place, which will be flowing directly from mobile devices to a cloud environment, which you probably need to look at and control. So when we're looking at mobile devices, some of the current controls which have evolved over the last few years has been investing in a mobile device management solution, which will secure and control your smartphones, tablets, which can enforce policies on these devices, use of passcodes, things like remote wiping out of lost devices. Again, remote wiping out of devices is available for laptops as well as mobiles. They have their pros and cons, but you need to evaluate what's best for you depending on what kinds of data is going to be sitting on mobile devices. In fact, some very standard industry security practices would include whole disk encryption, PIN code, having your security baseline, and having mobile disk risks added into your organization's awareness programs. Mobile applications, again, this is another big area. On an average, smartphone has at least 41 downloaded applications. So unless you have a very robust application management on your mobile, you would have employees download the wrong applications without supervision from the organization, and that in turn would be a huge risk. So organizations these days have started using policies for mobile applications, patching of applications regularly, and managed apps, and an in-house app store, in fact, which distributes applications to the mobile devices. The need in all these things is there has to be a continuous assessment of risks and increasingly look at what can be the controls to prevent and detect. The biggest risk that all of us understand is the hand that holds the smartphone. Quite often, people ignore the suggested controls, ignore the warnings, use passwords share passwords with others in spite of repeated trainings about sharing passwords. So user behavior is in fact the biggest risk given the mixed use of devices in an organization. So the other key area where an organization's security manager could work on is to look at employee support, enforce a policy for BYOD and usage of employee devices at workplace, revamp existing processes, make sure you have secure provisioning, deprovisioning, wipe out of devices, create a patch education process, encourage users to patch their mobile devices, and have a knowledge. I mean, after all, you're talking about people who are used to devices and continuously in touch with others. So create a social support mechanism which will help the IT augment its security, have a knowledge base, have a wiki where employees can use the solutions, look at a self-service support solution which they could use, and any problems they have, they could log in, find out if there is an existing solution to the problem. So a lot of employee support and wiki knowledge base would help employees when they're talking of using multiple devices. The other area one needs to be very cautious about is when you're handling regulatory requirements, the regulatory risks which come with these requirements have to be understood very clearly. Whether there are local privacy and security laws which affect your BYOD policies, you need to understand them and ensure you comply with them when you allow for such devices to be used in the office. So a structured approach to all of this is the key. Moving on, the third aspect I would want to touch upon is the millennials and social media. When all of us, when we started, at least I come from the age-old school of thought when I thought I wouldn't use social media for my work, or I wouldn't need to be on social media because it was for kids, it was for teenagers, right? Times have changed, and you have people, professionals, senior professionals who understand the advantages of using social media. Obviously, this is a great opportunity for organizations to get onto social media, to promote themselves, to market themselves, to understand how the market is perceiving them. At the same time, it comes with its threats. You have threats because of human error, you have threats because of application hacks, you have social scams and phishing attacks. I'm not sure how many of you have actually tried phishing attacks within your organization as a test. You would be surprised to see the results. I mean, I would suggest you just try a phishing attack. You put up a small link from an official looking ID. Ask some people to click on it, see what kind of responses you get, and you'll be surprised that in spite of so much of talking about phishing and not clicking links, you will find many of them. I mean, in fact, I think very recently, many of you would have got mails about updating your WhatsApp to a video calling facility. That was a phishing attack, right? So many of these things come with threats and opportunities, and again, the need is to look at how best you can minimize the risks while use the advantages that these new technologies offer you. Okay, so some guidelines: monitor your brand's presence, put somebody in charge in the organization, establish social media training, ask yourself whether there is someone in charge of looking at social media, what people are saying, what is happening on social media, to look at how you're engaging on behalf of the brand, to look at the platform's default privacy settings, security settings of social media itself. So a social media policy, procedures to protect your organization is the key. Make sure all relevant parties, be it executives, IT, security, compliance, PR, whoever is involved, you need to make sure they're all involved in defining these policies, have a set of do's and don'ts for every channel, include best practices, procedures, how your organization plans to implement. So these are some controls you would need to put in place when you want to adopt the advantages of social media and you want to engage with the millennials productively and effectively to improve your business. So the next thing is we've seen a lot of change. We're seeing change, and change is happening all the time. So how are we reacting to the change determines how effective we are in countering the security risks. Some specific areas which I would like to touch upon when we talk about change is earlier days. I think all of us who came from the legacy systems, the key every policy maker, every decision maker would talk about is prevent. Okay, that was a very well-known word. How do you prevent things from happening? How do you prevent risks? How do you take steps to prevent this from happening? Okay, now the need is to find and recover. Apparently, on an average, a malicious code is sitting in your environment for 200 days before you find it. That's some studies which tell you that you're already hacked. The threat is already inside your environment. It's not that you can prevent them. So now the need is, while prevention is the key and it's a hygiene factor here, the need is to find and recover. So how effectively you can find a threat which has already attacked you and recover from it determines how successful you are. The second shift, most of us, I think, grown in this industry have understood is, it used to be an IT's job. IT security, by definition, is IT's job, right? I mean, it's not my job. So that's not applicable anymore. You need to look at an integrated environment where everybody in the organization looks at security, the development, the security, the operations guy, everyone who is affected by threats, everyone who has a stake in the information, everybody who holds data of customers, who has regulatory compliance to do, everybody in the organization has to be involved in developing an integrated framework for security. The third shift is on password protection. When we look at passwords, it used to be a one-off password that you determine, and then you look at a strong password. I think it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 initially, and then people realized you have to move on to stronger passwords, and then you started figuring out how to create stronger passwords. Now the need is to have continuous authentication. If you find something fishy, if you find some anomalous behavior, you could increase your authentication. You could step up your authentication rules. And so ensure that it's not a one-time password that allows the user to get into your environment and attack all over the place. But if you think some behavior is anomalous from whatever is normal, you should ask for a second level of security, second level multi-factor authentication, which will help you. Okay, now again, earlier legacy was to protect perimeters. Now it's about protecting your data and assets, because it's become a perimeter-less world, and your data and information assets resides all over the world. And you really don't look at a perimeter as enough. Of course, you have a data center, you have to have a perimeter security, no denying that. Another very, very important aspect of IT security is training. When you're looking at training, you need to look at training as not as expensive, but which has a very high ROI. So moving on, we look at managing risks without assuming they're secure, and then looking at how to bring in a structured systems approach instead of being ad hoc, instead of saying we'll somehow manage. So let me just quickly touch on what is systems approach to information security. So when we talk about system, we talk about interrelated subsystems, which I touched on. So you have to look at IT, the environment, the people, the applications, all of it. When you look at the systems approach to information technology, then there is an interdependence of both internal and external factors more and more, because you are involved with partners, vendors, suppliers, who all are party to your own security. And ultimately, it's this weakest link which determines how effective you are at an overall level. Another dimension when we talk about the structured approach is to have a continual improvement program, which is something all models have been promoting for a long time. So it's not one time, but you need to have a framework which adapts. And in the current situation, the need is to adapt very quickly. I mean, we have been talking about continuous improvement for years now, but the need now is to adapt very, very fast. It can't be a yearly program. It can't be a quarterly program. You need to be agile enough to be adapting to what is happening in your environment on a continuous basis in real time in many cases. At a high level, again, we look at strategizing. Risk assessment is a very important part of systems structured approach. The assessment for vulnerabilities, threats has to continue, but now looking at the new environments, what the new technologies are offering, and how businesses are being affected by the cloud, the BYOD, or the mobile computing. Okay, so now the need is to look at all the risks and have a strategic posture on how you're going to be operating. And continuous test again, which is something that all of us understand. Continuously audit your systems, continuously look at improvements, incidents, learn from this, look at a performance assessment, take course corrections on a regular basis. All of this while you're running. I mean, it would have been enough to be looking at it on a periodic basis earlier, but now you have to keep yourself running to do all of these at the same time. That's the need. Yeah, while I talked about systems approach, a structured approach, most of you would have been thinking about models. There are multiple models in the industry. I will talk about ISO 27001, 2013. because that's one integrated model which is comprehensive enough for any kind of organization to work with. And it has a structure built into it. Over time, it's been refined. It's a 2013 model. The advantages of an ISO 27001 would be it's a widely recognized standard in the world. It addresses information security across industries. It has a complete list of controls which you can choose. I mean, there's a comprehensive list from which you could choose what really applies to your environment. And the ISO 27001 defines the requirements for an organization to set up its information security management system from scratch. It talks about how you could establish, maintain, and continually improve. Again, the model itself sets up the framework for a security risk assessment and adopt an overarching management process. It helps you look at internal, external issues. It helps you look at all the interested parties. It's a structured approach. I mean, you might do it if you thought through the whole process, but then that's where a model helps, because somebody's done all the thinking for you and what are all the aspects you need to look at. So you need to look at the requirements of all the interested parties and then look at the interfaces between activities within the organization and outside the organization. So all of it together, ISO 27001 has the following control groups. I wouldn't have time to go into each one of them. However, the list of control groups would tell you the comprehensiveness of the model itself. It covers the establishment of a policy and the organization itself of information security, touches on human resource security, physical security, supplier relationships, another key aspect. Information security aspects of business continuity. I mean, while you're talking about business continuity all the time, is business continuity itself putting you under risks. So what is the security risks of business continuity management? How do you make sure the security aspects are covered when you're looking at business security? And all the others, like your asset management. Compliance. Compliance is where, depending on the organization and your own business, what exactly you're doing, what are the compliance requirements for the organization, whether you're meeting all the compliance requirements. So looking at summarizing the overall presentation here, I guess half an hour is too short a time. But the 4 focus areas, if you look at for 2017, that would be identity and access management, usage of analytics. I did touch upon it earlier. The current thinking today is to have data real time, which would help you look at any anomalous behavior in patterns. Okay, so if you're seeing somebody walk the same way every day, one day he takes a different path, you know he's doing something different, and that should alert you and see what else he's doing and put some barriers in his way. So there are different ways one could use analytics to improve the security profile in an organization. Governance, risk and compliance is becoming more and more important, because statutory compliance is the key. If your organization is subject to regulatory requirements, or if your organization is working for organizations which are subject to such requirements, then you need to comply with standards. Data privacy is another big thing which one needs to look at. Adaptive security architecture, again the key word is adaptive here. We're looking at how adaptive your architecture is. How do you reduce your amplification of threat? Okay, there is a threat, but by being adaptive, you could restrict the potential spread. How to decrease the velocity of an attack by having an adaptive architecture. How to reduce the remediation time, how quickly can you respond. How to promote, how to facilitate availability of data. How to promote the correctness of data and reliability of processing resources. So responding to attacks quickly, making sure you're reducing the impact, reducing the threat amplification. Sun Microsoft has a list of objectives for adaptive security architecture, which you could look at, which will help you improve your architecture itself. There are a couple of poll questions to end the whole presentation. Thank you so much for being part of this webinar and taking part in the polls.
Yeah. So thank you, Vijay. That was a great session. We had